Donald Trump destroyed the East Wing. Yes, it is a crime. Welcome to Law and Society. Today we're going to talk mostly about that. There are a couple of other topics. But, while I was shocked and just saddened and angered and felt helpless, and while all of this was going on in my head, watching the East Wing being destroyed, and I talked about it in the previous episode, it didn't occur to me to go on Google and say, is destruction of federal property legal? And, if you just Google that, the statute that comes up is 18 USC 1361, which prohibits the destruction of federal property. And if the amount of that damage, if it is above $1,000, is considered a felony. So I wanted to come back and talk about it because I think right now there should be protests circling all of the White House. People should be descending upon DC to stop Donald from destroying the White House as we've known for decades. But that's not happening. Maybe we're, again, shell-shocked by this desecration. The people of DC, the neighboring areas, other large cities, they're also being terrorized by federal agents and intimidated by deployed National Guard for months now. And the country and the world is watching that happen. Americans are stretched and traumatized by Donald's sprawling police state as well as his chaotic, crumbling economy. Constant attacks for 10 months has had a demoralizing impact on the American people. We can still organize and come out in great force like we did on October 18th, but we're also exhausted by the attacks from within by Donald Trump. Yes, Donald Trump is the enemy within, and so are every one of his MAGA enablers who are allowing this to happen. This has been exacerbated by a legacy press that will not rise up and speak the truth. They will not wake the sleeping giant that is the American people because it would hurt their immediate profit margins. That is so myopic and short-sighted and harmful to our republic. And that is not how the press should operate. Most large media organizations have sane-washed the absolute abnormality of our times. And that's why I go to independent media like Public Notice by Aaron Rupar, Heather Cox Richardson's Letters to an American, Katie Couric, Charlie Sykes, Jim Acosta, Joy Reid. That's why I go to these other independent sources of media now. Brian Tyler Cohen, Midas Touch, The Bulwark. These are the places where I find news now because legacy media has failed. Even the New York Times, which is not part of a corporate enterprise, has not really come out and talked about the destruction of the East Wing or any other of Donald Trump's extreme measures in the language that it needs to be addressed in. There should be a sense of alarm in our country about what is happening. Then you have NSPM 7 that designates every opponent of Donald Trump's agenda anti-fascist and therefore a domestic terrorist. Think about this. Again, think about this. I've talked about this before. If the ruling regime says anti-fascists are terrorists, what does that make the ruling regime? And that includes MAGA members of Congress who continue to lie about left-wing terrorism where there is none. 8+ million Americans marched across the country on October 18th, and not one protester arrest or violent incident was reported. I vaguely remember hearing about the only arrest made was of a MAGA counter-protester who threatened to shoot peaceful demonstrators. Now, going back to the East Wing that no longer exists, the Planning Commission headed by a Trump appointee, has already said that he'll rubber stamp this desecration of the People's House to be replaced by an oligarch-funded ballroom. Remember this for later. Destroying federal property does not fall within even the outer perimeters of POTUS's constitutional duties and powers. But who will enforce it? See the problem we're in? Under normal circumstances, such an action has to be sanctioned by Congress and funds appropriated according to Congress and planning done by the Planning Commission, much like it was during George W. Bush's term, where he made findings that the White House needed renovations, and then Congress appropriated legislation and appropriated funds to be able to accomplish that goal. And Barack Obama saw those renovations through, as well as changing the tennis court that already existed in the White House grounds to a basketball court where college basketball players and veterans could go and play basketball. That's what the previous two administrations before Biden's administration did. Biden did not make any changes to the White House or the White House grounds. Under normal circumstances, the DOJ would prosecute anybody who destroyed federal property without authorization. But this isn't just any citizen destroying one of the most sacred American places. Over 130 years of American history has been destroyed. A part of the White House has been destroyed. And it is the sitting president who is doing it without any input from Congress or the people of the United States. And Congress, under the leadership of Mike Johnson and John Thune, are letting this happen without any pushback whatsoever. And they are likely to retroactively even endorse this, which is turning our constitutional order on its head. Donald Trump has thrown the book out and said private corporations will pay for the ballroom that will replace the East Wing. Things really couldn't be more dystopian. When this sinks in, will it be a catalyst for change in Congress? So far, nothing has happened. Also, in the midst of this notice, and I've provided the reference of the statute that Donald Trump violated by destroying the East Wing, which is 18 U.S.C. 1361. And if you go to that website right now, and if you are watching this during the shutdown that is happening, you will see that the notice at the top, the banner at the top of the DOJ page, read it. It accuses Democrats of shutting down the government, when that is not true. When Republicans hold every single gavel and office of the government, whether that be the executive branch, the legislative branch, and even SCOTUS. That is a violation of the Hatch Act that prohibits political activities by executive branch departments. But again, who is going to enforce it? Pam Bondi is not. Congress is not. Finally, on this topic, because the law states what Donald is doing is a clear violation of 18 U.S.C. 1361 that bars destruction of federal property, Donald can be held liable for it after he leaves office in 2029. Because of the statute of limitations is generally 5 years. Statute of limitations mean the time within which legal charges can be brought in a particular case. And generally those are 5 years. That is, if Donald Trump actually leaves the White House. That is the problem we're facing. Especially with Steve Bannon talking about it now. A possibility where Donald Trump tries to remain in the White House past January 20th, 2029. And social media is abuzz with a simple question and answer that who builds a $300 million ballroom edition that nobody wanted, that Congress did not authorize, that wasn't planned for, and then leaves that ballroom for others? And Donald Trump has joked about going past 2028 as well. So what would it look like if, say, a liberal wins in 2028 and Donald refuses to leave? What would it look like if a conservative wins who isn't Donald or Donald's choice and he refuses to leave? What happens if MAGA GOP and Donald make a full throttle push against the 22nd Amendment to put Donald on the election ballot in 2028? Will the states stop him? Will Congress? Will the Supreme Court? Or will they let him violate the 22nd Amendment like they're letting him violate constitutional commandments right now, whether it be the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Eighth Amendment, the 14th Amendment, through the states making these detention facilities and keeping people in cruel and unusual circumstances without due process of law? These are real questions we should start considering now, because we can't anymore be assured that the rule of law will hold Donald Trump and his posse accountable, or that he won't successfully upend our constitutional order. With authoritarian regimes, it always begins with small tactics, like targeting undocumented immigrants. Oh, that's kind of far removed from us American citizens, so we're not going to care. So, and then he inches to homeless people and mentally ill people. Then he enlarges the dragnet to Antifa. Then he further enlarges it to anybody who identifies as anti-fascist. Then there's the defying of the court orders, destroying federal property, corrupting the government infrastructure, and dismantling what cannot be corrupted. And it keeps going and snowballing from there into destroying the East Wing to build a ballroom of oligarchs, of taking a $400 million jet from a foreign government, and by way of doing that, giving that government room to house their air forces in a base in Idaho. These are all parts of an authoritarian regime. And since America's legal system failed to hold Donald Trump accountable the first time Donald attempted to upend our constitutional order on January 6, 2021, our ability to hold him accountable at this time is in serious question. And we should start talking about all of those things now. We need to start talking about him violating the 22nd Amendment because he's brazen enough to ask the Supreme Court to undo birthright citizenship, which is part of the 14th Amendment. His ICE troops are violating people's 4th and 5th Amendment rights every single day. Over 170 U.S. citizens so far known have been tangled up in DHS activities. So we need to talk about that. In this same thread, another topic that came up was how can states push back? And to that effect, Governor Pritzker of Illinois has issued an executive order to create a commission, an accountability commission, that will keep track of what federal agents are doing, what illegal acts that they're committing, so that when the time comes, these people and these agents can be held accountable, so there is a record of people recording videos, the body cams of Illinois state and local officers. All of this information will be compiled by the commission. And I would urge every other Democratic governor in the country to do the same thing with what's happening in DC, in LA, what was going to happen in San Francisco but has been delayed, in Memphis, in St. Louis, in Chicago, in Portland, in all of these other cities. And Donald is going to keep going to blue cities, and he's going to keep on pushing and trying to violate state sovereignty. And right before I started coming on, I came on here, we had this breaking news that Donald Trump has terminated, this is another topic, has terminated all trade negotiations with Canada because they bought ads during the World Series that talk about how tariffs are bad, along with referencing what President Reagan thought about tariffs. And because of that, Donald Trump has, because of this egregious act of telling the American people the truth, he has canceled trade negotiations with Canada. Think about that. Canada is thank you, Canada. Canada is helping the American people remember who we are, telling us what is happening now is not normal. To that, thank you, Canada, for standing with us. We need your support. We can use all the help we can get. Now, I'm going to end on a lighter note. So, I posted a clip of Professor Heather Cox Richardson's video, and one of her videos when she talks about Mike Johnson, and she says that Mike Johnson really does turn red when he's lying. He turns beet red, and that he blooms. And I think that's hilarious that Professor Richardson pointed it out in such such a beautiful way. The clip is just like 6 seconds, and I would implore you to click on the watch full video after you listen to the clip. It is karmic for me because Mike Johnson calls himself a Christian, and he goes up to the podium and constantly lies. And when he lies, it just so happens that Providence, or his human body itself, rebels against the words coming out of his mouth, almost as if the divine is giving everybody a sign saying, this man who claims to be a Christian is lying to you. So, I mean, I believe in the divine. I believe in the greater force. And it's a very broad brush with which I look at faith. But this is karmic to me in a way that is divine, and it's providence that the Speaker of the House, who has compromised the House of Representatives, who claims to be a Christian, comes out and lies to the American public with a straight face every single day. But as Providence would have it, he turns pink, he turns beet red, and he blooms. With that, thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Hey, remember to like, share, and subscribe, please, and pass the word on, and keep talking about all of these topics. Thank you so much for listening.